Hey guys, Xlice here. Denia is coming out in second half of 3.3, and that means our Fusion Burst and Toon Strain teams are getting a super nice sub DPS. In this video, I'll break down everything you need to know about Denia, how to play, how to build, how to team, how to Denia. Remember that this is on Media Server, so things are subject to change for full release. I cover multiple gadgets with guides, summons, and reviews, so don't forget to like and subscribe to be notified for more. Let's get into it. So, if you're a fan of Amy or Luke Herson, or honestly just like pink-haired dual personality girls, then Denia is probably right up your alley. She's got super fluid rotations, great sub DPS damage, crowd control, and a fairly versatile outro buff. So besides being the ideal sub DPS for Fusion Burst or Toon Strain, she also fits quite well in pretty much most generic teams. Let's break down combat and rotations. So Denia is probably one of the most straightforward sub DPS I've experienced in terms of gameplay. Here's her rotation in action. So she first starts in pink mode. Lead with her intro skill.
Is it my turn?
Plus a basic attack, and then E for full Forte. Then we ult.
Please, don't. Pity.
Now she's going to be in dark mode. Basic 4 to use up her dark Forte bar. Then use her enhanced E twice. This will fully highlight her little gingerbread icon, which allows you to finish her ult. This completes her rotation, and then you can outro. In full speed, this is what it looks like.
Is it my turn? Please don't. Forgive me. Piece by piece, radiance, no more. Whirling up.
So it definitely feels like one of the most concise rotations that we have for sub DPS, similar to how quick Sanhua is to set up. Now let's break things down step by step. 3 things to notice about her Forte. The normal bar that fills and consumes like usual, the 3 diamonds, and then the gingerbread icon. The normal Forte has 2 modes. In base mode, it's pink. Basic attacks and her E will charge it up. It will only fill up in this mode. In ult mode, it becomes dark. Basic attacks only will consume the dark Forte bar, and they will deal 50% more damage and be considered liberation damage. While the dark Forte is being consumed with basic attacks, this will charge her gingerbread icon to prep for her finisher ult. Now the diamonds are separate and affect her skill only. They are called dark cores, and she'll get them naturally once every 12 seconds, but most commonly through her intro, which provides 1, and through her middle passive, which grants 2 every time she engages in combat in pink form. If you noticed in the rotation demo, with just a normal intro, she actually starts with 3 diamonds right away. This is not just a one-time thing. If you're in an extended fight with multiple rotations, as long as she enters with her intro, her setup will start with 3 diamonds. These diamonds will be used in her dark mode form after you consumed her Forte with her basic attacks. They allow her to use her enhanced skill, and each diamond increases the damage multiplier by 150%. So 3 is a 450% damage multiplier increase. After using her enhanced skill twice, her gingerbread icon should be fully filled in dark mode. This is because casting the second version of her enhanced skill will grant 40 out of 100 of those points. This will allow her to use her ult finisher, which completes her rotation so you can outro. But she's still doing damage even when off field. Her ult finisher will leave behind a black hole on the ground called Erosion Field, consistently dealing damage over its 30-second duration and vacuuming nearby enemies every 4 seconds. Now, the entire time that she's dealing damage, she'll be constantly applying either Fusion Burst stacks or inflicting Toon Strain. So for Fusion Burst, her intro, ult, and the black hole left behind will apply 2 stacks of Fusion Burst every 2 seconds while they deal damage. Basic attacks will apply only 1 stack. For Toon Strain, her ult, intro, basic, or the black hole will apply or refresh Toon Strain on the target. When in Toon Strain, she'll also apply a 50% flat toon increase to the enemy once every 6 minutes, allowing you to front load your toon break damage for an easier fight. Alright, so that basically covers her entire kit. Pink mode, generate Forte. Dark mode, consume Forte. Use her enhanced skill during dark mode, and then use ult when gingerbread is full, and leave behind a black hole that deals damage once every 4 seconds for 30 seconds. And just so I don't forget, in her dark mode ult state, she also does have an extra 30% attack. Pretty sick. Now let's summarize the total buff she provides to the team. Top Forte node. Fusion Burst. All Resonators gain a 30% fusion damage bonus. For Toon Strain, all Resonators gain an extra Toon Break boost, 10 by default, and an extra 40 if they have 50% extra toon build-up rate for a total of 150%. Mornia will really like this since her field gives extra 50%. So if you do decide to run Toon Strain, Mornia will be the best Toon Strain sustained. For the outro buff, Fusion Burst provides team-wide 60% Fusion Burst damage amp for 30 seconds, and Toon Strain provides incoming 15% all damage amp for 16 seconds with no requirements, or 40% damage amp for 16 seconds if that character applies Toon Strain. So with these buffs, it becomes pretty clear. Fusion Burst will benefit Amith the most, or Amy. Toon Strain will benefit Luke Herson the most, but Toon Strain mode is still good in generic teams because, as you guys can see, the 15% all damage amp is universal and has no requirements. Alright, final notes for Forte Prio. Nothing surprising here, it's just damage scaling to look out for. Ult will be her largest source of damage, and then her enhanced skill damage from the Dark Cores, and then her black hole damage from the Forte Circuit. This is the multiplier per hit, and it attacks about 8 times in 30 seconds. Basic attack 4th, and intro last. Refer on screen for exact priorities. Now let's talk about her build, starting with weapons. So her signature is a pretty standard mixture of raw stats and a sub DPS team buff. 36% crit rate, 12% attack, 36% self-lib damage bonus for 5 seconds when the wielder inflicts Fusion Burst or Toon Strain. While this 5-second buff lasts, other resonators who inflict Fusion Burst or Toon Strain gain 24% attack increase for 15 seconds. So main DPS like Amith or Luke Herson will receive the 24% attack. Denia's Erosion Field will be applying the Fusion Burst or Toon Strain every 4 seconds for 30 seconds. So these buffs that are 5 seconds are full uptime. Total stats is 36% crit rate and 48% stat for herself, 24% team stat. Other possible weapons. So Yinlin's String Master from way back in the day is still one of the best general rectifiers in the game. 36% crit rate, 12% damage bonus, and 12 to 36% attack. Denia will use one base skill that deals skill damage, giving 12% attack, and will be off-field during her black hole damage, giving her another 12% attack for 24% total. While she does use her enhanced skill twice, all of that damage is considered lib damage and will not contribute to this attack buff. Last option to consider is Cosmic Ripples. This has 54% attack and 12.8% regen, but it has no crit rate at all. Not really the greatest option, but it's a standard weapon and works if you don't have anything else. My personal recommendation is going to be sticking with either her signature or String Master. Other weapons that I did not mention here have no relevant stats unless just like raw crit rate or raw crit damage. All right, now on to echoes. So I need to switch to the databank really quick because there are 2 different sets for 2 different modes. The very standard one is 5-piece chromatic foam. This is for Fusion Burst. Total bonuses is 20% self-fusion damage bonus and 25% fusion damage bonus to the incoming resonator. Then we also have 5-piece spliced memories. And this is specifically for Toon Strain. 10% attack and a 20 Toon Break boost for all resonators. So those 2 5-piece sets are basically the only ones you're going to use. And then now we're going for main stats. So crit 4 cost, which is usually going to be crit rate here. We have fusion or attack for 3 costs, and then attack 1 cost. So she has 0 built-in crit rate. Even her Forte nodes give crit damage. So the only sources of crit rate she gets is from her weapon and from her echoes. For this reason, she wants as close to 100% in the stat page as possible because she's not getting any extra. If you are planning on running Shorekeeper with her, decrease this cap to 87.5%, but most common supports run with her will be Mornia or Chisa. For energy regen needs, I would say 120% is comfortable. Her damage is considered liberation. So for substats, hunt for crit rate, crit damage, regen, liberation, attack in that order. As normal, Media Server fixed echoes are running a crit rate 4 cost with double fusion 3 cost, with mineral, crit rate, crit damage, energy regen on everything. All right, so here's an example stat page. With those fixed Media Server echoes, we have 2.3k attack, 94.5 crit rate, 229 crit damage, and 135 ER. This is pretty much what I would expect builds to look like. The crit rate still has room to reach 100% since every piece is a minimum 6.3% roll. Crit damage can achieve 250 with higher quality rolls. Energy regen is comfortable here, and attack is pretty comfortable. Builds with near perfect substats aim to achieve 100% crit rate, 250% crit damage with 150% ER. Not a necessity though. 134 is like pretty good, and I've never had issues with her ult uptime. Substat priority, crit rate until 100%, then crit damage, then regen, lib damage, and finally attack. Okay, now for sequence nodes. There's a lot going on here, so bear with me. S1, 30% crit damage increase, and then immunity to interruption for certain abilities. and then a passive buff guarantee. Pink mode is going to be 140 point per second. Dark mode is 30% attack. Pink mode buff is active from rotation 2 onwards, so this guaranteeing it just adds it to rotation 1, the first one that you do. Dark mode buff is already active if you enter it during a normal rotation from pink to dark with our ult starter, so this one will just add it during overworld where you stay in dark mode just to explore. S2, during fusion burst mode, gives 50% fusion damage buff to any resonator who inflicts fusion burst. So this would be like Amith. And then when fusion burst activates on enemies, Denia gains 1% ignore fusion res up to 10%. For Tune Strain, Tune Break boost increases by 20 and their off tune level maxes out to 100% once every 6 minutes. So this is basically an instant tune break. Denia's base kit gives 50%, so this is another flat 50% increase. And then finally, enhanced skill gains a 1.4 damage increase. S3, ult finisher gains 1.8 damage increase. Denia can now hold 5 dark cores, which increases her enhanced skill multiplier gain from 450 to 750%. Pink mode passive Forte gain increased from 1 to 4 per second. And then casting ult finisher gives 30 concerto energy. Passives are also improved. Once per rotation upon entering combat, dark cores and pink Forte bar is maxed out. And then when dark cores are maxed, basic 4 or her skill will consume all cores for a 1200% multiplier increase, considered liberation damage. Alright, so there's a lot going on for S1 to S3. S1's main damage increase is that 30% crit damage and the immunity to interruption, which is pretty normal. S2 mainly provides increased bonuses specific to either fusion burst or tune strain depending on the mode. S3 gives more ult damage, a higher cap of her diamonds, or her dark cores from 3 to 5, and then entering combat will maximize her diamonds and her Forte bar, shortening her setup time, where you can instantly ult. And then her diamonds are also consumed in extra time to deal more damage. S4, her black hole left behind after her ult deals damage every 3 seconds instead of 4. This black hole lasts for 30 seconds, so this makes it deal about 25% more damage. S5, starter ult deals 2 times more damage. And then S6, first a free 60% attack and fusion damage bonus gained for herself, then extra bonuses for her modes. Fusion burst adds a detonation proc on her black hole. Every stack applied explodes the fusion burst already on the enemy and does not remove the stacks. And then Tune Strain increases the stack count by 1. So overall, there's kind of a lot going on for her sequence nodes, and basically a majority of the benefits happen at S1, 2, and 3. S6 just further improves her damage and adds massive AoE to the fusion burst by exploding on every stack. And then Tune Strain gets a scaling of the damage DPS to a higher ceiling. If I do end up showcasing S0 to S6, it will be on my second channel, so check me out there for more. Okay, now for teams and showcases. So we've got Fusion Burst, Tune Strain, and a general team setup. Fusion Burst will incorporate Chisa and Amith. Chisa is replaceable with any generic support, and then Amith is our only dedicated Fusion Burst DPS, so she can't be replaced. Then we have Tune Strain. This will incorporate Mornia and Luke Herson. Same deal. Mornia is technically replaceable with any generic support, and Luke Herson is our only dedicated Tune Strain DPS, so he can't be replaced. Obviously, if you need to switch between the two, it's very easy to do so on this page right here. And then if you're looking for any general team setup, any support here, Denia plus any DPS. And if you're doing the general team setup, be on the Tune Strain mode, so at least her outro skill is going to provide 15% all damage amp for anyone. If you're under Tune Strain, obviously, they'll get 40%, that's for Luke Herson, but even in a general sense, on the Tune Strain mode, we'll still give a little bit of a buff. Alright, so now that the foundation is set, time for showcases and damage comparisons. So first thing to note is that this is Media Server TOA, so things are subject to change. But there's a big thing I noticed when testing things out. Boss HP seems to have increased by a bigger margin than normal, which means all of our one rotation team DPS is lower than previous. Here's a comparison of 3.1 Amy damage on Rupture team and 3.3 Amy damage on the same Rupture team. Both TOAs have the same buffs in favor of fusion damage, and Amy's personal damage is identical. We're seeing a drop from about 60% boss HP to 50%, which you can view kind of like a 16 to 20% HP increase for the bosses. So now that you guys are up to speed, 3.1 Rupture Amy will be our base comparison, so you're fully aware of why things may look a little bit quote-unquote weaker than usual. Because you're probably used to seeing my team showcases, and most of these teams originally were dealing like 60 to 65% in one rotation. So to start things off, it will make the most sense to see the full rotation of that Rupture Amy setup in 3.3, then compare it with Denia in Fusion Burst mode. So this is the Rupture team setup like usual. Mornia will be leading with her setup into Lene. Almost all of these showcases have the same kind of intro, so the timing is like pretty comparable.
executed. Authorizing maximum output. Structural override initiated.
All right, intro into Lene. Ult to set up, very simple and straightforward. Follow up into an E, into holding basic, into the Forte, into a plunge, EQ, and then tune break. All right, now Amy's. Immediately ult. And then we're gonna be weaving our basics with our E, like usual. Then when ready, we're gonna send 2 enhanced E's. There's our first one. There's our second one. And then enhance heavy. And finally, finish her ult. Alright, so saw that damage. 467k damage. You guys can see the HP. It's almost exactly 50%. Now we're gonna fast forward. Second finisher ult. Literally identical damage. If we take a peek back, 1 minute, 14-second clear, 2 rotation, perfect kill. All right, so now we're in fusion burst mode. We have Chisa leading with her setup into Denia, into Amy. Tune breaking when available, obviously. So Chisa's quick setup here.
Come, meet your end.
Ult into enhanced E, and then we're gonna hold basic just to get maximum damage out here.
Break apart.
Then switch to Denia. Basic E. Ult. Basic until her Forte is gone. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's gone. Q and then double E, and then ult. Very fast, super fast rotation and an outro. All right, so same thing with Amy. You guys are gonna see the same type of damage output here. Ultimate into basic plus E combo. Okay, here we go. Enhanced number 1. Enhanced number 2. And enhanced heavy into ult finisher. Okay, so important things to notice. 399k from 467 to 399 is a pretty big drop. It's about almost 20% personal damage drop, but let's take a look at total HP. All right, so boss HP is just under 50%. So it is slightly lower, but considering how much Amy damage we lost, that means that Fusion Burst is adding quite a lot of damage over time. And you guys know that Fusion Burst is designed to be a lot more effective in AoE situations. And obviously we only have one enemy here, so it's doing pretty well here, right? All things considered. All right, we're gonna fast forward. You guys can see right here, that was a Fusion Burst number into ult finisher. So second ult finisher number is 444. So we got a little bit of an increase there. So there is a little bit of a ramp, which is very nice. So the single target damage after the second rotation is ramping up. Now, as you guys can see that we are killing on this, right? It's a 1 minute, 14-second clear time, which is the exact same as Rupture. And also our damage is scaling. It's pretty good. All right, now time for Tune Strain. So first is our old setup with Mornia, Lene, and Luke Herson. So while this is playing, important thing to mention, Luke's build is fixed at about 70% crit rate, meaning that he will be missing 1/3 of his crits, which is kind of bad. The runs that I've personally decided to showcase have on average the same amount of crits, and I reset until at least his final ult damage does a crit. Just losing that is a big chunk of his damage. So when properly building Luke, I do highly recommend 90% plus crit rate in the stat page because he doesn't have free sources from his weapon or echoes. Perfect timing. Let's get into Luke's rotation here. Okay, so intro in after the tune break. And just basic, and then press those highlighted buttons when they happen. There we go. First one, we need 3 enhanced E into basic combos. So that's the second one. And third one. Okay, good damage here. And we're looking at, this is our, okay, so you guys can barely see it. It's about 451k. And as you guys can see, once again, boss HP is nearly 50%, same as before.
Assuming master control, all units fire.
All right, so very nice. I want to make sure that last hit does crit. So we're doing about 50% here, which is very good. Fast forwarding, just so you guys can see it here. This is Luke. He's going in. Okay. I get an extra tune break here, even though I technically didn't need it. And he should be killing on his ult. Okay, so as you guys can see, once again, it's a 1 minute and 15-second clear time. These teams are basically balanced almost perfectly. They're all killing around the same time. The rotations take about the same amount of time. Pretty chill there. Now, we're going to go into our final, which is Denia and Luke. So now that you guys have seen how strong the current teams are, you might be wondering, what's the point of Denia? If all these teams are doing the same amount, why are we picking up Denia? Well, I think the reason is because AoE, if you would like it, is valuable, or if you don't have Lene. That's a pretty big one. Okay, second one, this is our setup with Denia here. Same thing as usual, Mornia setup into Denia's into Luke person. When I personally find this comp, I actually like it. That's because Denia's rotation is shorter than Lene's, which I personally really value because Lene's playstyle can be a bit clunky and there might not be people who enjoy that much. Denia's is super fast. You intro, you basic, and you E. You immediately ultimate, then she's in dark mode. Then you just do the basics until your Forte is gone, which you can visually see right now. Boom, it's gone. Then you press your Q, you double E, you ultimate, and you're good to go. It's very simple. There's almost like no issue at all with the rotation. Alright, so now Luke's going. This is actually pretty cool to see, by the way. Just take a look at how the damage plays out here. Alright, so first one, because you're seeing already a slight decrease of damage, right? Okay, 447k. And if we take a look, you guys can see that this is slightly lower than the Lene setup. Luke Hurson's doing just a smidge less, maybe like 1 to 2% less. That's totally fine. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit so you can see his final rotation. He actually does a lot more later on, okay? Okay, so right here, boom. First crit is 218k. And then ultimate, you guys can see it. There's a 500k. So he's doing a little bit more on second rotation, which means that Denia's scaling potential is stronger than Lene's, which is also valuable if you consider like the ultra endgame content. So we are doing about a 1 minute 10 second or 1 minute 9 second clear time, which is, it may not seem that fast, but we're going from 76 seconds down to 71 or 70 seconds, which is like a 9 to 8% drop. Quite good, meaning that the difference between Lene and Denia's rotation is on average about 3 seconds. So Denia's is 3 seconds faster. Now, this might be really big for you if you are a speedrunner or whatever the hell. I personally value that fast rotation because it means that things rotate much smoother, and also you're not stressing out about buffs expiring and stuff like that. Yeah. Showcase is done. Closing thoughts. Denia, in my opinion, feels like more of a universal sub DPS investment to Lene. So you guys understand that Amy's damage is basically balanced between Fusion Burst or Toon Rupture. Fusion Burst is more AoE, Toon Rupture is just raw damage. For Luke Hurson, I think that Denia's value scales a bit better. Not by a crazy huge margin over Lene, so it's not a must pick up, but I do value that time save and the ramping damage. It's also both nice. If you have both Amy and you have Luke, then Denia is pretty good to have because you only have one Lene and you can't clone her, right? You can't split her up. Otherwise, it's really a matter of, do you enjoy Denia's playstyle or do you enjoy Lene's playstyle? If you don't have Lene, then I definitely recommend you pick up Denia. If you do have Lene, then you can kind of like think like, okay, maybe I'll just save for maybe like Lucilla in the future or something like that, right? Do note that she is designed with this really nice outro here. When she is on Toon Strain mode, this 15% all damage amp will add just that extra edge to push her above a lot of other sub DPS. So do make note of that. There's a common thing in Wuthering Waves where it's like every single sub DPS has a very specific buff, right? Denia is a kind of like outlier on that front. I do value this, the fact that you can slot her in basically every single team and she will be valuable because she does damage both on field and off field and also buffs your immediate resonator with 15% damage amp. And who doesn't like damage amp? It's really nice. Obviously, it's weaker than dedicated units, but she also does damage herself, so it's pretty nice. At the end all be all, I would consider Denia to kind of be like the shorekeeper of sub DPS right now. I know that's a big statement, but hear me out. Shorekeeper is no longer our quote-unquote premium sustain. Right now, everyone really wants Chisa for all the negative status, and Mornia because we're in an insane Toon meta, right? Shorekeeper is like the tertiary, it's like the third choice. Denia, I would consider her to be universal. Shorekeeper is the third choice, but she's still universal. If you are like a newer player in the game, you could always rely on her. She's always going to be consistent. That's what I consider Denia to be. Always going to be a default option, but probably not going to be best in slot unless it's Fusion Burst or Toon Strain. That's going to wrap it up for this complete guide on Denia. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of her, and if I do make an S0 to S6 showcase, it will release on my second channel. Thank you guys always for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.